Hello everyone, and welcome back to another of our weekly sessions in English here at the Prado Museum just a few minutes before the museum opens. This is a program that's put together with the generous support of the American Friends of the Prado Museum. And today we're going to be talking about Ignacio Zuloaga. Zuluaga came from a family of artists and artisans, like so many painters that we have here at the museum. His father was a metal worker, his uncle was a ceramicist, and he was born in 1870 in a small town in northern Spain in the Basque Country. But by the beginning of the 20th century, he had made a name for himself all throughout Europe and North America, although perhaps the most difficult market for him to break into was Spain. And today we're going to see a little bit about why that is. So, in the first place, let's take a minute to think about why this painting is here. Many of you probably think of older paintings here at the Prado Museum, not from the 20th century, but that's starting to change over time. Here at the Prado, we have paintings by Joaquin Sorolla, by Maria Blanchard, even a Picasso, paintings that help us understand other collections, and especially, of course, the 19th century collection. This was part of a donation in 2019 from a German collector who spent most of his life in Spain, Hans Rudolf Gerstenmaier. Zuloaga really recognized his own admiration for the old masters of Spanish painting too, like El Greco and Ribera, Velázquez, Goya, Zurbarán, all painters that we can find here at the Prado Museum. He painted many portraits, often group portraits, and often in urban settings in small towns in Castile. And here we have a portrait from around 1913 of a Manola, or a maja. A Manola is a woman from Madrid. In the 18th and 19th century, belonging normally to a lower or middle class, who would be recognized for her dress. And this woman in the 20th century is dressed like Manola, like a maja. And they were known for this extreme version of traditional Spanish attire, and also recognized for their attitude. Both men and women, Manolos and Manolas, had a reputation of being bold and proud, a little bit sassy. They were brazen and stylish, and really a favorite subject of painters like Goya. And this lady's wearing a mantilla, a white mantilla, and it looks like maybe she's dressed to go to a bullfight. That would have been a time that a young single woman, it would have been appropriate for a young single woman to wear a white mantilla. Zuloaga also liked to play with this kind of image of a cropped figure placed with a distant landscape. The landscape is very concise, succinct. It's something that he learned from his friend, Émile Bernard, this kind of landscape that's really reduced to its most essential elements. Also notice her dark eyes. Zuloaga painted women's eyes like this several times with this mixture both of makeup but also of shadow to accentuate facial features and makeup. And it kind of gives, it adds more character, but it also even adds kind of a femme fatale kind of feeling to this figure. She looks bold and seductive and even dangerous. There's also a scene on the fan that she's holding here. It doesn't look like it's a scene that belongs to the time that this was painted. It looks like it's a little bit older. So it might be an antique, it might be something that she inherited, and that could speak of her social position if this were an antique fan. It could be an upper-class woman embracing tradition. And Zuloaga's paintings really feel like they are searching for this atemporality by capturing modern interpretations of tradition, continuities of tradition. And this brings us to some of the difficulties with Zuloaga's painting, the way that he painted tradition and Spanish culture. And so we're going to see why that's a little bit difficult here. In fact, he's an artist that historians are continuing to discover, to rediscover and reconsider because of the image that he painted of Spain and how that was accepted abroad. After 1898, when Spain lost the last of its imperial possessions, there was really a national cultural crisis and debate with regard to national identity, whether traditions and customs should be embraced and promoted, or whether they were part of the reason for the country's decadence, stereotypes that needed to be left behind to step into or to show an image of Spain ready to participate in cosmopolitan modern Europe. Many of Zuluaga's darker paintings of Spanish culture showed traditions, but also poverty and deep religiosity. It was not the image that Spain wanted to promote of itself stepping into the 20th century, which is one of the reasons that he had a hard time breaking into the market here. Although his painting would be defended by most of the group of poets and essayists and philosophers of the generation of 98. But even the generation of 98 thought that Zuluaga's images, like this one, a little bit lighter, were often pastiche and a little bit more suited to foreign tastes that were looking for a romantic idea of Spain. Less appropriate for the Spanish market, and that these kinds of continuations of stereotypes were misleading and damaging to the projection of images of Spain abroad, tying it to ideas of exoticism and backwardness. Some of the first international travelers that came to Spain were English and French men and women, and as part of the Romantic movement, they were travelers that, of course, were interested in myth and the sublime and exoticism, and they found a lot of those things in southern Spain, in Andalusia, and when they went back home, they brought with them these exaggerated ideas of romantic portrayals of Spanish culture, of flamenco dancers and gypsies and bullfighters. On the other hand, others like José Ortega y Gasset identified Zuloaga with a rejuvenation of traditional styles rooted in the greatest Spanish painters like Velázquez, which could offer a much needed alternative for modern art, resisting what he thought was a decline in the arts due to the rise in democracy and the dehumanization of culture. So all of this goes to show how behind a beautiful portrait, there's so much more to research and so much more to debate, and even more so perhaps when it's an image like this one of Spanish tradition and culture. So thank you for joining us today for our weekly session in English, and we'll see you again next Wednesday.